Hello.
Namaste and good morning, everyone. I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan
Hello.
Sansthan, Nai Delhi, welcome you to IMPRI Hashtag Web Policy
Who are
Talk.
you?
Today, we are here for a special talk on the state of real estate and housing in India amidst COVID-19 pandemic, impact and way forward by Professor P.S.N. Rao. I would now like to welcome our moderator for today, Dr. Soumyadeep Chattopadhyay, who is Associate Professor at Vishwa Bharati University, Shanti Niketan, West Bengal, and Senior Fellow at IMPRI. Sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ritika, and a very good morning to all of you from Shantiniketan. And I also welcome you to this city conversation series hosted by the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, New Delhi. And just to set the backdrop of today's discussion, I'd like to mention that we know that as the urban centers, they become the epicenters of COVID-19. It actually exposed the shortcomings of Indian cities. Inadequate provision of urban basic services, the lack of affordable housing, the lack of adequate social safety nets, and most importantly, the vulnerabilities of the informal settlements. And we have at the same time embraced urbanization as a key plank in the national development strategy. So it is important to discuss and debate several related issues. Now, as far as the housing is concerned, we need to find answers to several important questions like to what extent are our urban policies successful in assuring access to housing and services among the vulnerable section. There are many affordable public housing schemes like we have this central Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Still, why is it that a large number of houses built under these similar schemes remain unoccupied? Why haven't they been successful in narrowing the demand supply gap in affordable housing? And in case of the private housing market, why is it that a large number of landlords intentionally leave their houses vacant despite significant demand for housing? And also, how do the underlying governance framework in our cities affect the outcome of these government policies? Now, the policymakers, they face very tough challenges to unpack such housing paradoxes in case of Indian cities. Now, this city conversation series engages with disparate urban challenges in general. And in today's episode, we hope to learn the underlying issues that the pandemic has put forth, especially around the effective affordable housing and the sustainable urban planning in India. And we are delighted and honored to have today with us Professor P.S.N. Rao, who is the Director of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. And apart from being the member and chairman of various important institutions and the committees by the government of India, he's also chairing the National Association of Realtors in India. And apart from, and also we are also very much honored to have several eminent personalities as other panelists. We have with us Dr. Amita Bhide, who is the professor in the School of Habitat Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. And Professor Bhide has also been deeply involved in issues related to urban poor communities, the community organization, and the housing right movements and advocacy groups. And apart from that, Dr. Akshay K. Sen, who is the Assistant General Manager at Housing and Urban Development Corporation Limited, New Delhi, will join us. We will also having Mr. Samir Unhale, who is the Joint Commissioner of Department of Municipal Administration, Government of Maharashtra, and Mr. Pavan Dixit will be with us, who is the co-founder of Property 360 Degree Karnataka, and also Mr. Dhaval Monani, who is the CEO of First Home Realty Solution. So we hope that this session will be very much useful and insightful for all of us who are trying to understand the complexities of Indian urban housing scenario. And today, Professor Rao will speak on the state of real estate and housing in India amidst COVID-19 pandemic, the impact and the way forward. So once again, I welcome all of you, all the expert panelists and all the participants to this city conversation series. And I just let me now request Professor Rao to deliver the lecture. It's over to you, Professor Rao.
Kindly unmute, sir. Professor Rao. Yes, you have to. Yeah. Good morning and thank you, Dr. Soumyadeep. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Please go.
Okay, great. So, very good morning to all of you. Nice seeing people from various parts of the country, as far as Shantiniketan and Mumbai and Ranchi. It's about a year since we've had this lockdown. So it's almost like the lockdown anniversary, if I may say so. So the impact of this, I mean, this was something which caught most of us unawares, and the housing and construction situation in the country being what it is, the moment the lockdown happened, if I take the developer perspective, construction projects came to a halt. So the moment everybody was told that you need to stay home and stay put. So where is home for most construction workers? They suddenly realized that there's no point in staying back here. We need to go away to our villages. So we all saw those images on the television, I'm sure. People trying to get back in large numbers. So construction projects came to a complete standstill for a good number of months, and subsequently, when the unlock 1 and unlock 2 started happening, the return of the people from the villages has still not happened completely. While there were a few developers who tried to retain their workers, a majority of them had actually left. So what happened was that a very large number of construction projects actually stopped. Housing projects stopped. As it is, there are figures. There are several lakhs of unsold residential units lying vacant or not constructed. There are stalled housing projects all over. There are the differences between all of these are very subtle. But the figure has been put at something like a whopping 40 lakhs. So that's a huge number spread across several cities. NCR, the National Capital Region, where I am from, is perhaps the largest of those. So with so many stalled housing projects and nothing really happening, whatever little was happening, that also came to a halt. So as we all know, whenever a project stops, there is a time overrun and there is a cost overrun. And then again, getting back is something which will have a lot of costs which are hidden, which will all be involved. And ultimately, that's going to affect the buyers. So the developer community in the country got affected because of the lockdown. This is point number one. Now, if you look at the way in which we have been building in our country over the last several decades, unfortunately, we still continue to follow a very labor-intensive kind of a methodology. Some would argue that this is a very good thing because we have a very large unskilled workforce in the country, or semi-skilled workforce in the country, people coming from the rural areas and so on and so forth. So they are quite okay. I mean, indirectly, this is helping us. But today, suddenly, the developer community has woken up and they're realizing that our dependence on labor has to come down. We need to go in for more mechanized methods of construction of housing units, so that the supply side issues are taken care of. You can't have projects which are having a gestation period of 4 years, 5 years, 10 years in some cases. You need to actually build very fast because the person on the other side doesn't have so much of patience to keep on waiting. So unfortunately, there are very, very few developers who are using the modern methods of construction. So while there are many negatives on this construction standstill in the housing sector, the positives, we've been made to realize that mechanization is very important. We've also been made to realize that modern technology is very, very important. And we've also been made to realize that people are very important, because you take the workers for granted, but then the moment they're all away, then you realize how important they are. and without them, even a small number, if they are not there, then the machines will not operate. So therefore, in terms of government response, if you look at this, the government has been very seriously looking at infusion of mechanization into housing industry. There was something recently called the Global Housing Technology Challenge, which the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs had launched well before the pandemic. But then it was the pandemic year, which was the year when this construction was actually supposed to happen. This was not by design, but it was more by default. So in this, the way in which the government of India is looking at is a complete ecosystem wherein you reduce construction wastage, you reduce the amount of labor that goes into housing construction, and you also increase the speed of time. You increase the speed of construction so that in a reduced amount of time you are able to deliver, and so on. And surprisingly enough, there were as many as 54 different technologies from different countries which participated in this challenge, which our country organized. I was a part of the committee, so I have seen these very closely. People from various countries across the world, they all came to showcase rapid housing construction technologies, and they were willing to set up factories in India, willing to set up plants in India. Many people are perhaps not aware, but this has been happening for quite some time. And finally, there were 6 state governments who agreed to give large parcels of land for what are called as the lighthouse projects, where each of these 6 chosen technologies would actually build housing as a part of the PMAY, as per the PMAY broad framework and specifications, and something like about 1,000 houses in 1 year, which would mean so 365 days, so which would mean something like it's actually a very fast rate of construction. So something like 2.5 houses every day. So that's the way in which it is moving forward. And the Prime Minister recently inaugurated this, and the work is going on, and one can actually go and look at all of these. So this is one side of the story where the government had responded. The other side of the story of government response was that there are all these huge migrants, and where do they actually stay in the city? There is this construction workers legislation which is there, which actually makes it mandatory that you need to provide for construction workers housing for all projects which are beyond a certain scale. But unfortunately, that is not really implemented for again reasons best known to our bureaucracy. So the government again launched right in the middle of the pandemic year 2020. There was the launch of what is called this ARHC, Affordable Rental Housing Complexes. So can we not have complexes built by the industrialists or by the corporate sector, private sector, wherein there would be a concessionaire, and then he would construct complexes where there would be affordable rentals, and these would house the migrants mostly. Quite a few state governments have signed on with the central government. Whether this will really mitigate the problem or not, well, I've had some doubts. I recently presented a very detailed paper on the ARHC, and identified as many as about 8 or 9 issues that could come in the way of implementation of this ARHC, and I had urged the governments concerned that they need to look at these closely. But now only the time will tell whether this is going to succeed or not. Now, interestingly enough, within this was inbuilt the idea of using all the earlier housing under JNNURM and RAY, which were all lying vacant, to be incorporated, to be utilized. So strangely enough, the question arises, nobody is trying to analyze as to why were all of these lying vacant in the very first place. We had taken students to many of these projects, and I was myself quite surprised to see large housing estates built under JNNURM and RAY in some of the so-called progressive states, lying totally vacant. And then we tried to probe and find out what are the reasons. And we found that the reasons were actually very simple and they could be sorted out. Things like a lack of a bus connectivity, because invariably these projects were on the outskirts of the city. So all you needed was to provide a good bus connectivity. So there is a transport corporation. So you can always have a few buses in the morning and in the evening to help people come to the city, because people are mostly daily wage labor. So they can't do anything living in the outskirts of the city. Their bread and butter can be earned only right in the heart of the city. So they have to come to the heart of the city for their daily wages. So they have to use a bus service. So what they need is actually a bus pass, more than an apartment. In my opinion, a bus pass is more valuable for them. So you just give them a free bus pass. All the people living in this colony, we'll give you a free bus pass for the next 5 years. You put it in your pocket and you can travel free of charge. And you will find that they will be quite happy and they will occupy these houses. Many people did not occupy. The few who occupied, they said that, look, there is no school nearby, so we don't want our children also to become construction labor. We want our children to study. And earlier in the slum where we were staying in the middle of the city, there was a school nearby and we were sending our children there. But today my children can't go to the school because we are located so far away. So we are looking at housing not as a complete ecosystem, but as houses, as something which is brick and mortar and cement and steel and construction, and you need to build. Yes, of course you need to build, but then if you don't put the add-ons, which are more important than the main thing itself, it is like something like you give me a mobile telephone and you don't give me a mobile charger. So what use is the expensive mobile telephone costing 1 lakh of rupees if I don't have the charger which costs me 2000 rupees? That mobile phone is no use to me. So it is like that. And the third is, we found that there was no water, and therefore people have to come down from several floors and then collect water from the ground floor and again carry it up. So very simple things: water, connectivity, and education. If these three things could be sorted out, then even if you are staying in a far off place, then the occupancy will actually happen. So we have been ignoring some of these important issues, and therefore that has been affecting us. Now I'll slightly change gears and move forward. In terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, the other thing that happened was loss of jobs. A large informal sector was all asked to sit at home, so no work, no income. Now, while the unlock has brought back all the chole bhature walas and the redi walas and all of those street vendors back into action within no time, and I think they are alive and kicking because their needs are very limited. Uh, the people at a slightly higher income level who've all been retrenched, they've lost their jobs. They have no incomes. And the other day I was coming back, and I was sitting in an Ola cab, and then I found that the gentleman who was driving the Ola cab was actually a mechanical engineer, and he lost his job because of COVID. And for about 6-7 months he was sitting at home, and then he went into a depression and all of that, and finally his family told him that why don't you take a bank loan and get yourself a Ola cab, because now people who were traveling hitherto in auto rickshaws and buses, because of safety, they now they don't mind spending a little bit more, but maybe travel in an Ola cab because you're the only person sitting there and it is safe or something like that. Now jobs are becoming very important. So reduced affordability, inability to pay the EMIs, inability to pay your rents. So the middle class is affected, while the rich people have enough to fall back upon in their bank deposits. Probably the middle class, who are for whom the first of every month is very important in terms of the salary they get. How do they pay up their EMIs? Of course, there is a government response to this, but to what extent? Paying rents. So here again, what has happened is that a large number of landlords, a large number of tenants have been asking the landlords that let's have some informal arrangement. I was paying you a certain amount of rent every month, but then for the next 6 months, I'll pay you only maybe 50% of that rent. Please accommodate me because I've lost my job, and so on. So I know personally a large number of cases where the landlords and the tenants have actually been sympathetic to each other, where the tenant also comes and says that, look, I'm not asking you to allow me to live for free, but then at least I'll pay you some amount. Don't throw me out because I can't get another place. And the landlord is also sympathetic and says that, okay, we can forget about the lease agreement for a few months, and then again we get back. So a lot of social cohesion has come about here. Interestingly, if you look at some of the crowded areas where there are all of these students, there's a lot of paying guest accommodations and all of that, and landlords are now wary and they don't want to have so many people around. So many people are not willing to give their houses on rent to the student community. These co-living options, and many of these. I only hope that these will be certain temporary phases. But now the other thing that has also happened is this business of working from home, and this has actually opened up a completely new dimension in the housing sector, in the sense that your home is not just meant for you to live, but it's also meant for you to work. So a large number of real estate brokers whom I keep meeting, they do tell me that now there are a certain group of people who are looking for larger sized homes, because they would like, I mean, the third bedroom, which could even mean a small, it's a 2 plus 2.5 BHK as they call it. So 2 bedrooms, and the half is actually a servant room where I will not keep a servant, but then I will actually use it as my office room. So this kind of thing has started happening in a big way, because people have suddenly realized that while internet and laptop has been there for a long time, we never really took this webinar or working from home seriously. But now we are forced to do it, and now many of us are actually realizing that this is a very good way. And I'm told that even the government of India is thinking of a 4-day week rather than having a 5-day week, and the 5th day perhaps you can all sit at home and you can work, something like that. So there is a lot of change that is happening here. If you look at the commercial real estate, the commercial real estate is taking a big beating, because a large number of offices are now telling people that, look, you need not come, you can stay at home, and we don't need such a huge office. We will close down this big office. We will only have 1/4 of the area where we'll have only a few key employees, and all the others you stay at home. And in any case, because of your kids, you have an internet connection and you have a laptop, so you sit at home and you work, and you don't have to travel. So you save on energy, you save on time, you save on so many things. So we don't need such big offices. So commercial real estate has taken a beating. Large number of commercial inventory overhang, as they call it in their technical language, is something which we are growing to see. Reduced rentals, reduced sales. The market has gone into some kind, I will not use the word depression, but a complete slowdown has happened. So sales have not been picking up. But again, very positively, in the recent past, if we see that residential sales have actually started again recovering in a big way across several markets, and people are now seeing the importance of owning a home, because you're staying on rent is actually not such a good option. So it's better that, I mean, I don't know whether there'll be a job or not. So at least let me have a house. So people are beginning to buy, and residential sales are recovering, while the commercial real estate is taking a beating. New launches, of course, in Delhi, I have seen a couple of new launches, but in many places, I think this is not really happening. I've also seen people making new kinds of devices, particularly in big cities, particularly for the middle income population, where you have very small apartments where your bedroom has to be converted into an office room. So there is a cabinet. There is a cabinet, much like the cabinet which our kids use for their study, and you can just pull out, and you can convert the cabinet into a small cabin of maybe 4 feet by 4 feet or 5 feet by 5 feet, and you will not hear. Quite often we hear the sabjiwalas and the and all of that when we are doing these webinars, because that all that is happening on the street. So you lock yourself in a little cabin, and then you do all your work very carefully, and then after some time, when it's over, then you can open the cabin, and then it becomes a cabinet, and then you're back in your bedroom. So there are people who are designing these, there are people who are selling these. That is extremely important. So these are some positives which are also happening. Now let's look at this whole concept of distancing, whatever you call it, social distancing or physical distancing. So now real estate developers, real estate brokers, they're all looking at taking a complete relook on the marketing strategies. So how successfully can we do e-marketing, because of the sales slowdown, and you can't bring people to your office, you can't have large offices where you have distancing. So therefore, most of the developers are today sending all their brochures only on WhatsApp, and they will also conduct a webinar for you. They will send you videos which are short, with very careful explanations and all that. So to give you a near life experience, so that you don't have to go and do the physical meeting. So this complete e-marketing concept it's not that it was not there earlier, it was very much there, but people would always say that nothing can beat the physical experience. Of course, nothing can beat the physical experience, but then a lot of questions can actually be answered in this manner. So that is one part of the story as far as the brokerage community is concerned. Now there are other very serious issues. If you look at government response, and if you look at the developer community, you will find that there is a serious issue today of liquidity in the market, talking about the financial issues. So the government has tried to lower interest rates. Your home loan interest rates are have come down like anything. FD rates have also come down. So in fact, that's one of the reasons why the home sales are picking up, because today home loans you are able to get at about 6.9%. This is a good. The government of India has also done an infusion of something like 15,000 crores of rupees into the National Housing Bank, so that in terms of the refinancing which they have to do, there is enough money to give to the home loan seekers. There is a moratorium on term loans for about 6 months, which is being offered. So these are all some responses. The RERA compliance. On the RERA compliance, again, the government has decided that the deadlines can be extended by 6 months. There's a threshold limit for the insolvency proceedings, which was earlier about 1 lakh. It has gone up to 1 crore. And also some of the states, particularly I must appreciate the state of Maharashtra and the state of Karnataka, stamp duty reductions have happened from about 5%. That's come down to about 3%. So on the financial side also, there have been many steps which the government has taken. There are, of course, many more. The wish list of the real estate developer community, marketing community is very long. Capital gains tax, for instance, you want to sell one property and reinvest somewhere else. Capital gains, unfortunately, has never been touched in the recent past, so that's quite huge even now. So there are plenty of issues on that side where the industry is struggling. Now, what do you do with all your stalled housing projects? What do you do with all your vacant, unsold inventories? This is where I think the local governments have a very, very important role to play. Many of these areas, which are outlying areas, they're not properly connected with roads, no good schools, no good bus services. So unless and until you do all of that, I know of a large number of residential projects which are actually built, but then these are not getting occupied because all the other things are not there. So unless and until you create all of those, the ecosystem is not complete and families will not move in there. So that is extremely important. Stalled housing projects, where a large number of middle income families have got stuck. Their savings are all in, they are unable to get their flat. More than 10 years have passed, so huge investments have been made. So you can't go here, you can't go there. So how do you restructure these huge investments? So that is where again I think RERA is trying to do some solving. There are also restructuring which is happening. I know of a good number of projects where joint ventures have been made, where you bring in, there is a developer who's completely stuck, but you can bring in another developer, you can have a JV, and then there is a profit sharing, and therefore you are able to complete the project on time and you are able to keep your promises. And you will do all of this only because if you don't do that, then you will have to also follow your brethren into the jail. So there is some threat which is required. Many of our developers have gone to the jail and they're sitting there. So the others are now afraid, and they're trying to really solve this problem seriously. The government is also trying to solve the problem seriously. But even after all these efforts, if you take the UP RERA, Uttar Pradesh RERA, which is perhaps the biggest, the most problematic is the UP RERA, because the largest number of problem cases are in the UP RERA. They have been able to touch only 50% of the total problem. The remaining 50%, in terms of percent, it is 50, but in terms of actual numbers, it is lakhs of cases. Those are yet to be addressed. So there are serious issues here. But then I would look at the real estate and housing sector in totality as going through some kind of a churn. There is an internal churn which is happening, and the cracks are all getting fully exposed. So now we know how to consolidate. So I would look at the current phase when the COVID vaccination is going on, and look at the whole of 2021 and 2022 as 2 years of consolidation, where people will become more realistic. A large number of states in the country have taken affordable housing as a concept very seriously. There are affordable housing policies in place. People have now realized that luxury segment is only one part of the story. The larger part of the story actually lies in the middle income housing. So middle income housing is being addressed. Good number of affordable housing projects in Gujarat, even in the NCR, surprisingly, in Haryana particularly, good number of affordable housing projects doing very well, while luxury projects actually hanging. So I think we are becoming more real. Real estate is becoming more real in the country. There are larger urban issues, whether it is municipal capacities, whether it is master plans. I will not get into all of those. Those we have been talking about for a long time. So that rejig also has to happen, because if you look at again the smart cities concept, just look at the website and look at the large number of projects which are there, and actually see how many of them are really going to affect the entire city. Many of them are what are called area based, small interventions in a particular pocket, which will affect only a very small number. So that is what it is. But then the smart city operations have actually shown us that modern technology can do a lot. And that is probably a learning that we can take from the smart cities concept, and that could also be profitably used. So the subject is quite complex and vast, but I've tried to capture a few thoughts in this short time that's made available to me, about half an hour. So I think here I'll put a full stop, and let's listen to the viewpoints of the others. If I have been able to trigger some um, ideas or whatever reactions from the other panelists, and then if there are any questions, any responses, I'll be very happy to take them. And I thank IMPRI. Dr. Arjun has been after me for quite some time, and I've been postponing these dates one after the other. But then finally, I said that we have to do this one of these days. So here we are on the 13th of March, very close to what is called the Ides of March. 13 is an unlucky day for many, but we are doing this discussion today. So over to Dr. Soumyadeep Chattopadhyay.
Yes, thank you, Professor Rao, for your very insightful presentation. Like, it's really exhilarating in terms of exposing or unearthing almost all the changing contours of real estate and housing in India, especially amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And almost you touched topics. For example, you talked about the government responses towards the housing or real estate related problem in terms of infusion of mechanization in the construction. And then you talked about the problems related to the affordable rental housing complexes, and then how the loss of jobs and livelihoods can have some negative actually have some negative impact on the reduced affordability of the people, and how they are actually impacting the demand for housing market. And also at the same time, you mentioned about the changing nature of the use of houses now because of this new work from home and all these things. And also you mentioned some of the supply side aspects related to the financial markets, which are really useful or would be need to be strengthened in order to give the much needed fillip to the real estate and housing sector. And overall, what I think is that it is really important to understand the nature of housing problem, and also important, especially the processes that the household adopt to adjust any sort of deviation between their current and optimal housing requirement. Because the problem that you mentioned about the about AHRC and why so many housing units still remain vacant. So this is very much important for us to understand the different the processes, the strategies which the households adopt to adjust any deviation between their current and optimal housing requirement. And also, it is important for us to understand the role of government in affordable housing programs very much more critically, much more closely, and also the role of state level financial and non-financial institutions in facilitating the access to optimal housing for a household. So with this thing, let me now request Professor Amita Bhide to present her viewpoint on today's topic. So it's over to you, Professor Amita Bhide. And as I already mentioned, that Professor Amita Bhide is she's the professor at Tata Institute of Social Science, and also she has been deeply involved in issues related to the urban local governance planning, and also the urban transformation, and especially the housing right movements. So it's over to you, Professor Bhide.
Thank you, Dr. Chattopadhyay. I have what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah, please.
Yes, ma'am.
5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Please stop me when this time. Yeah. Okay. So firstly, thanks to IMPRI for organizing such an interesting talk. And thanks to Professor Rao for this very interesting overview. I would say it was not just the state of real estate, but it was like the state of housing policy, the state of real estate industry, the state of the demand for housing, So you touched really so many things within your talk, and thanks for that. I just wanted to pick on two, three things amongst what Dr. Rao said, and perhaps provoke you into perhaps responding to them, as well as perhaps give my views on them. And the first is really, I think, the pandemic in some ways illustrated to us, uh, with the rush of migrants and everything, the very, very fragile and the very imperfect nature of our housing situation in cities. Right? Uh, why did migrants have to return? One was because, of course, the work sites were closed, and a lot of construction sites were closed. In fact, the in several sites, the developers abdicated the workers completely. So there was no income, there was no support. And the second thing is also that, especially where it came to casual workers in construction, the Naka workers, they had housing, but the state of housing was so insecure that they couldn't afford to pay rentals, and therefore they had to really leave the city because their housing also became insecure in some way. Right now, I think that this entire reality of housing, that where formal housing, legal housing, secure housing is just not available to these segments of population, is an issue which is revealed to us time and again. But recent policy measures, recent government announcement actually do not seem to be doing justice to this. And if perhaps, Dr. Rao, I would ask you to make a specific commentary of the affordable rental housing program in relation to these provisions and this state of vulnerability which was revealed to us post pandemic. So you did make reference to the affordable rental housing program, but if on this dimension there can be a comment, I think that will be very good. The second thing that I wanted to point out and perhaps also provoke you, Professor Rao, into thinking is that states like Maharashtra, which have been actually at the forefront of the real estate market, I would say, uh, have also seen uh, a tremendous pandering to the demands of developers post the pandemic. Okay? So in a state where in a situation where the economy is impacted, uh, and the revenue of the state governments are highly linked also to a real estate economy, the large scale concessions which are being given to developers uh, in order to stimulate real estate development, um, and these these have been in the form of extra FSIs, more permissions, and there are a whole list of incentives. And there are also incentives then being given at the central government level. Okay. Now, in the context of the segmented market and housing supply that we have, uh, what is the impact that these kind of incentives are going to create? Would they make the distorted housing supply more distorted? Uh, would they really be able to create a good amount of affordable housing supply? And the third question that I really wish to ask is, if for the last 20-25 years or so, we have constantly been finding, we know the problem, and the problem is in that large numbers of our people in cities stay in uh, inadequate housing because formal housing is unaffordable. Okay? And the solution which is being found is in constructing more and more houses. Okay? I think our censuses show that perhaps the solution does not lie in constructing more and more houses. But then, why do you think governments keep on believing and developers keep on pushing the governments to only construct more and stop?
So thank you. Thank you, Professor Bhide, for your three very crucial and as well as very pertinent questions. And I think they are broadly related to the issues of another crucial issue, which is related to the housing right. And in fact, so I have been also trying to looking at these or trying to understand these housing problems. So what I also feel is that maybe it is more important to consider the urban poor's housing maybe less as a commodity and more sort of an infrastructure to enable the poor and their families to experience the improved standard of living. So that might be one way to address this kind of imperfectness which is there in the urban housing market. You mentioned about the segmented nature of the urban housing market. So maybe Professor P.S. Rao will be throw some more light into it. Before that, now let me now move to Dr. Akshay Sen. He is with us, who is fellow at HSMI HUTCO. And Dr. Sen has been doing a lot of research on these housing related issues over the last few years. So I now request Dr. Sen to chip in and have your comments, please. It's over to Dr. Sen.
Thank you so much, Samadip. And it's always a pleasure to listen Professor Rao. And I think after he gave the detail about what is happening in the real estate, I think nothing much to add to what he described. I think he gave the whole gamut of issues. Now and the issue starting from the loss of jobs, no income, reverse migration, you already discussed about all these, and the government response and the ARAC and its degree of efficacy, and apart from the technological aspects, which he's expert in it, but he also start upon the financial aspects, like liquidity crunch, stagnant demand, supply chain disruptions, all kind of things. So, and of course, the whole issue of business models now relooked, more kind of e-marketing in all sectors, the residential, commercial, as well as the retail sector. So, so thank you so much, sir, for all these things. But let me just give you, some of the kind of the measures which we need, to kind of again strengthen our sector, and what are the future outlooks post-COVID like this. So if I think if you all know, 2 days back, the OECD report has come, which has has predicted that the Indian economy would grow not by 11.5% in 21-22 as predicted by IMF to a month back, but it is much more than that, like 11, I think 12.6% in financial year 21-22, and which is very good. And one of the reasons which will help this 12.6% even more is this real estate sector. And that's where the importance of the real estate sector is there. No country in the world, or even in our country, if you compare the growth of the real estate and the growth of the economy, so it is always in the positive. When real estate increases, obviously the economy grows, and when it doesn't, then the real estate, the Indian economy also suffers. So that is why it is very strong. Why this is, and it is well documented. Like IIM Ahmedabad study and the recent NCAR study shows that the real estate sector has the income multiplier of 5 and the employment multiplier of 8. That means if you invest 1 unit in housing or real estate sector, it will give you direct, indirect, and induced employment totaling of 8 times. So that is why real estate sector is very important. And to that effect, whatever the things which Professor Rao has given in his address will help actually our economy to grow. So let me just give just to add what he has said and what are the measures required in the supply side and in the demand side in order to further kind of push the real estate sector. We have to support on the supply side the NBFCs. He also pointed out that by expanding the moratorium period, maybe not 6 months, as sir said, but it should be 1 year and more, and which is being done by some of the banks. And then we have to also do the one-time debt restructuring or resettlement, by lending institutions, so that NBFCs will get to tide over the liquidity crunch. Then we need to also have the working capital fund, which will help in the stall projects to kind of come into the force. And then also we need to provide the last mile connectivity, kind of last mile funding to complete these stressed or stalled projects. And then there is also need for capital, risk capital, and the government guarantee to banks to enable them to lend to real estate projects. That is also one issue which is being demanded by the real estate body, and I think these are required. On the demand side, we have to reduce the maximum rate of interest on new housing loans, and which most of the kind of banks have done now, like recently, 2 days back, SBI has done, ICICI has also done, SDFC has also done. And then we have to also, as sir mentioned, capital gains tax, no capital gains tax for residential properties held for more than 1 year. And then rationalize the stamp duties, and then even the 50% reduction on the GST rates on the housing segments. That is also important. And in fact, for the those who do the residential or the affordable housing, maybe there should not be any GST. Why 1%? Maybe less than that. Yeah. So all these things, and I see for the future, kind of in the next 1 or 2 years, the kind of the real estate would be a major kind of contributor for economy's journey to the $5 trillion economy by 2025. Our Honorable Prime Minister has envisaged. So that is why the real estate sector, most of the reports, some of the reports I read has projected it will be around $1 trillion by 2030, from the present around 180 billion dollars presently. So yes, as I kind of foresee the residential real estate sector, which Professor Rao has mentioned, that would take some more time to kind of come out of woods, but increasing urbanization and the perennial appetite of Indian middle class to own a house, it means that there is existence of the residential real estate sector, and it will rebound quickly. Similarly, the commercial real estate sector is also likely to rebound in this quarter of this current financial year, and maybe in 2 quarters in the next financial year. And the retail sector would also go a dynamic phase, like Professor Rao mentioned, e-marketing and similar kind of relooked business models also. And land banking and land pooling would be also a key factor in the real estate development. And then obviously there will be financial innovations. It has already happened. Some of the new financial instruments have come, like the development impact bonds, and then the REIT, and then IMPRI. And then recently there is kind of a relay refinancing model is coming. So all these financial innovations will come because of, I feel, because of the COVID. So COVID has taught us how to innovate the things, which Professor Rao also mentioned. And Professor Rao also mentioned a very important thing, that the RERA would bring in much much more transparency and consumer confidence for smooth functioning of the residential as well as commercial sector. So post-COVID, I see few kind of slivers of silver lining, like rental housing. So not ARAC, as Professor Rao has his reservations, degree of efficiency, but I think rental housing for on PPP basis for social need based and the market this thing, and then the senior citizen housing, I see it will also come up. So let me stop here now. I think my 5 minutes is over. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sen, for sharing your insights on how to how to boost up the real estate sector in India. And now let me request Mr. Samir Unhale, if you please give your comment, who is the Joint Commissioner of the Department of Municipal Administration, Government of Maharashtra. So it's over to you, Mr. Unhale. So are you? So can you hear us, sir?
Can you hear us, Samir sir? I will coordinate.
Okay,
Yes.
sure. So then let's move over to Mr. Dhaval Monani, who is the Director of Affordable Housing, Anant National University, and also the founder of First Home Realty Solution, to please have your comment.
Thank you. So I'll quickly
Your camera.
rest on 2 points.
Dhaval sir, your
Okay.
camera, if you can, yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. So I quickly, based on 2 points, one as a developer. So one thing I started when I returned to India, when I started my company, my target was to do housing in the 2 to 3 lakh rupee range. And initially in tier 2 cities, we did 3 to 5 lakhs. And still in tier 1, let's say outskirts of Delhi and Bombay, we are doing housing, launching it at the 15 lakh rupee range. What I would say is that the government entering this sector has actually proved to be very, very detrimental to the sector in a large way. In the way they have entered, they have come with the best of intentions. But if you see in the last 6 years, as a target of 22 million houses, they've been able to build something 3.5 million. And the only real, I think, service that they have done is to bring in the CLSS scheme, which everybody would be aware of, which has been very good. But the building spree that they have gone on, and which has supplied this 3.7 million across thing, if you actually do an audit and you find out the amount of money that has been wasted is colossal. And what they've effectively done is that the innovations that were coming in the private space have pretty much been left out, because if a person today gets a house for 7 lakh rupees in any city, the actual price of the house is anywhere between 15 to 22 lakhs. So, if there was another mechanism, delivered, that's an indirect subsidy. But by doing that, they're killing off the private sector to enter into this space. So, yeah, that was a little bit of my point on that. Second, what I would like to say is that we did a fair amount of work during the COVID pandemic. And I was very, very excited when, the affordable housing rental policy was announced. Because when we saw that, all the migrants had to leave, one of the reasons that all the panelists rightly said was that the sort of housing available here, the insecurity of tenure, the quality of housing, everything added up to it. One thing that I felt is that we've been confusing housing as ownership till now, and rental, if we had looked at it as a completely different asset class, which they're trying to do, would have gone a long way. In India, we have less than 30% of organized rental housing available. The policy that we all, I'm sure, have read, and I was doing some numbers to keep into, to see that if we could do a project like that in, let's say, a city like Pune or Ahmedabad, and if I were to do a greenfield project just looking at current construction costs and target a rental of 1,500 rupees, even with cross subsidy, you would end up needing viability gap funding of 2,000 rupees per bed per month. So I think the government, though its intentions are very, very good, from an implementation side, needs to look into this much more deeply. A 25-year-old lease with no, financing options, which are, they put them something on paper, but when we went and talked to the banks, we were treated as any normal investor. So I think there is still a huge disconnect between what is required in the market and how the government is envisioning it. I think also that in the last few years, the government has placed a lot of emphasis on technology. The sad part is that we are maybe 20 years behind. If you look at some of the most successful government housing programs in the world, something like the Toki in Turkey and other ones, those are the technologies that should have been here maybe 20 years back. So I think we are doing catch up. Second thing, mechanization works very well in government related projects, because where you have a very, very good, you're not reliant on sales. While you look at any developer in this country today, if we are all reliant on pre-sales and an ongoing sales cycle to fund the ongoing construction. There are, I think, various numbers that have been done, so I won't bring that up again. But in spite of the best intentions, if you see, the adoption of technology has happened in only very, very specific cases and very, very specific price points in the country today. What I would also say is that tomorrow, as we look at our huge housing shortage, we should always look at a very, very worrying number, which is the number of vacant homes. So I recently, Anant University, which is a university based out of Ahmedabad, now they just published a report which actually highlights that 14% of all housing in Ahmedabad is vacant. The national average is something like 7.5%. But 14% is equal to the number of slums in Ahmedabad. And a large part of that is in government housing. So when we talk about the success of government housing in Ahmedabad, what we found that 35% or more of all government housing in Ahmedabad is vacant. Either it is owned by people who were not meant to get it, or for various other reasons. We've listed down, there are listed numbers and the reasons are listed down in the report. But which is a very, very worrying case, that at one time when we are trying to build this huge stock, when the government is subsidizing it beyond its capacity, not being able to meet its goal, we have this huge stock which, due to lack of policy, is lying vacant, is deteriorating very, very rapidly, and is likely to keep on deteriorating going ahead. So, rather than talk about housing, I think we should also say that when we are talking about migrants, we are talking about labor, we should be talking about shelter, because anybody coming into an urban area as a migrant, as a laborer in the first go, is always looking for shelter to reach a certain inflection point where he can think of either bringing his family or owning a house, or look at more organized housing. And that is a model that we really need to think in, and to think how the private sector can play a role, because there is no way that the government apparatus will be able to fulfill this huge shortfall and demand that exists. Thank you.
Soumyadeep sir, you're on mute. Yes. And Samir sir has also joined. Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Monani, for your comments. So now let me just quickly move over to Mr. Samir Unhale sir for your comments. It's over to you, Mr. Unhale. So.
Sir, you're not audible. If you can, sir, put out your, yes, maybe it will work. If you can unplug your earphone. No. If you can unplug your earphone, then it might work. No. No, we cannot. No. Okay, sir.
Okay, then let's move over to Mr. Pavan Dixit, who is the co-founder of Property 360 Degree. It's over to you, Mr. Dixit, for your comments.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's great to hear a lot of thoughts from thanks here today. There are a couple of points on my core area of work is basically rentals. So I think post-COVID and during COVID, what we basically saw is we have been trying to talk more on the need of rental management for about the last 3 to 4 years, and basically COVID being holding on people to their locations and not being able to manage or travel to manage their properties in different locations has basically created a lot of opportunity for people in secondary market, that is rentals and property management. So we saw a lot of property management companies coming up during COVID, and now they are they're quite trying to expand now. All right. But what I'm trying to witness and what I'm seeing on ground is basically today we are in a very paradox situation when it comes to rental yield. Okay, because as we are all aware that the rental yield is probably one of the lowest in the world. We may be at the bottom when we see the what is the rental yield that we are getting in India. At the same time, when there is increasing need of rental management activities, that's going to where the middleman is going to property managers or the rental guys. They're going to have their share of property management fees as part of this business. So what that's going to mean is that's going to impact the rental yield which the investors are going to get at the end of the day. So the point that I'm trying to see here is there are various aspects. One is what is that basically needed from the policy point of view, from the business community point of view, to increase the rental yield for the investors. So we saw that the recent report from ANAROC say that the luxury side investment properties are seeing increase in rental yield from around 3 to 6%. So that's on luxury. So we can imagine what could be the numbers for mid and low investment sector as well. So not sure about the numbers in those areas at all. So how is that bridge going to, what are the actions which are needed from different corners that's going to increase the rental yield? And so there were, one of the points Mr. Dhaval made is the vacancy of properties is being a very big concern. So that's why I think that's not the only reason, but the Model Tenancy Act, one of the reasons why Model Tenancy Act is trying to be implemented is that there are a lot of issues in the rental sector overall. So one of the reason is to give the confidence to the investors so that they can invest, they can earn the rental revenue, so that becomes a passive income. But with this kind of paradox situation, it is becoming, I think the rental sector is getting into more of gray area, how people are going to get money out of their investment in real estate, and how the rental property management is going to be structured. Because unless there is no good money coming out to the managers, the middlemen who are going to manage, I'm not sure about, again, the sector of the section of property management companies or the strata management companies who are going to manage the affordable rental housing societies that the government has been talking about. What's the kind of revenue they are going to get out of if they have to manage this as a third party involved there? So these are the areas that I see is where there are a lot of thoughts needed, or if anyone in the panel have a lot of clarity on this, would like to hear from you people. So yeah, so these are the things that largely I've been saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixit, for your observation. As you rightly pointed out, like we have the experiences of this Maharashtra affordable rental housing scheme, the scheme which was actually initiated by the Mumbai Metropolitan Regional Development Authority, and there, ultimately the government had to sell those units, the units which were there for the rental purposes, because it was politically difficult for the government to act as a rental management agency. So we had those bitter experiences. So anyway, let me now request Professor Rao. You have already heard the comments made by all our panelists. So if you please respond to their comments or observation.
Sure. I think there has been one common area, that's the ARHC, the affordable rental housing complexes. As I mentioned, this ARHC complex has just been announced about 6 months back. So here the idea is that either you use the existing vacant housing projects, government housing projects, or you construct new housing projects. And there are, of course, so many concessions given for this. And the whole idea is that there is a private entity who will come. That private entity is referred to as a concessionaire. And that concessionaire is supposed to construct, operate, and maintain the complex for a period of 25 years. And affordable rents are to be charged by these concessionaires. Now there are many gray areas here. I've identified about 10 of them, and very recently I had presented a paper in which I have documented all of these. But broadly, if you see, there are many issues here, because if you look at the way in which migrants currently live, we are a community where we tend to save a lot of money. As far as possible, we try to save. So take the example of a car driver in Delhi who has come all the way from Bihar. He is earning about 15,000 a month. So he can easily get an accommodation in many of the urban villages or unauthorized colonies. Normally, it's about 1,000 rupees for a bed. And generally these people, they're all bachelors, and then they do their own cooking and that kind of a thing. So can the ARHC complex match this kind of low level of rentals? Because after all, why will a private operator come in? A developer will always come to construct, operate, and maintain the ARHC only if there is a profit. So what is the great profit that he's going to make after taking such a huge risk? So that is a big question in terms of the affordability. The second is that being migrant workers, there are a large number of people in Kochi, for instance. They've come all the way from Bihar. They need accommodation. So you construct an ARHC in Kerala, and then the fellow is there for 6 months, 8 months, 1 year. And then one fine day, the construction project is over. So without telling anybody, he will just walk out. So it's very difficult for you to run after a fellow. So the last month rent will never be paid. So when the fellow doesn't pay rent, how are you going to hold him? Because you can't catch him. His mobile number has changed, and he's gone away to some other part of the country. India is so large, and you can't spend your time and money running after these fellows just for a small amount of money. But there could be a very large number of people, because these people are basically migrants. So there will be a lot of rent arrears, and you just have to write off those rent arrears. And still, I'm expecting that you'll make a profit and you will buy into my scheme, which is, I think, a big thing to ask for. Then litigation. Now, people will not vacate; they will continue to stay there. and political patronage being what it is in our country, there will be lot of local politics which will ultimately come into the picture, and then this poor operator will have trouble. So I can see a lot of litigation issues. I can also see a lot of social issues, because generally people coming from various places, they tend to flock together. All of them will stay in one particular place, so they can take the ERHC operator for a ride. And further, there many of them are bachelors, and you are also having families living there. So putting all the families and the bachelors in the same complex is again something which is a tough call, because they all have, they work very hard during the day. In the evening they want to have a drink. So there will be issues, there will be many social issues that will happen here. And then you are also giving them high FIR, so the developer will utilize the high FIR to build so many. So there will be intense ghettoism, maybe. I don't want to call it that, and I hope it will not happen, but I can foresee something like that happening. Then ultimately, if I'm not making profits, then where is my incentive to maintain the complex very nicely? As a developer, my job is not only to build, but also to operate and to maintain. So maintaining this complex, what happens when there is a power failure? We're talking about multi-storied rental complexes. So maintenance of lifts is quite expensive. Power is an issue. Water is an issue. So you can't start fighting with all these fellows. So I can see a lot of trouble. I mean, the policy is very nice on the paper, but I can foresee that when you actually start implementing, maybe in some cases it will succeed, but I have several qualms about this. I have several reservations about this. But anyway, this is what it is. So let's try and see it. It's better than not doing anything. I think we should do something for the migrants. Then the other point was made on today the real estate sector is more developer driven rather than consumer driven. I cannot agree more. This is a fact. In fact, the consumers, the Indian middle class, we don't have an association. The developers have an association. Every state, the developers have an association. At the national level, they have an association. Every city, they have an association. The brokers have associations. So they are lobbies, and they go and they cozy up to the powers that be, and they ask for all kinds of concessions, saying that, look, we are paying so much amount of tax, we are giving employment to so many poor people, so therefore you must give me additional FSI, you must give me income tax concession, you must give me that concession, this concession, FAR concession. And the powers that be generally play to that demand of the developers. But when it comes to the consumers, it is a poor middle class fellow who has been cheated by a developer and he's not getting his flat. And what lobby has he got to go and fight his case? He has to fight himself. Even his neighbor will perhaps not come. So even so, there are cases where some consumers have fortunately come together, and 15, 20, 30 people have formed their associations, and they've managed to put some developers in the jail. But then let me tell you that most of us, we are more interested in getting our flat on time rather than seeing the developer in the jail or in hell. I don't care where the developer goes. I'm only concerned about my little 2-room flat. If you can give it to me on time, if not on time, okay, I'll give you 6 months, 1 year, 2 years delay. But you please give me my flat, because I want to live with my family. I'm getting old. I'm a pensioner. I've completed 65 years of my age. I wanted to buy a flat. You said you'll give it to me in 6 months, but it is 6 years. I'm already 75 years and I'm not still getting my flat. So I'm not really concerned with the developers going to jail. I'm concerned about the project being completed and I get my product. I get my money's worth. After all this so-called risk funding, viability gap funding, giving everybody's turning they're bending their back and trying to do everything to help the developer and to get the project. But then imagine the fellow whose flat delivery has been delayed by 10 months. What is the compensation that fellow has got? he's not moving into his own flat. He's losing HRA of 25,000 every month, or 20,000 every month, or 10,000 every month for the last 10 years. So he has already lost so much. So and what great service you are doing by fulfilling your promise after 15 years. You have not given him anything extra. Whereas the developer who has committed all the violations, he's almost going scot-free. So there are very serious issues. The only good thing that happened is the recognition of the consumer and the enactment of the RERA. That was also not there at one point of time. So today at least there is a little bit of fear, if I may call it that, as compared to the previous. Then there was a point on this construction spree, if I may call it, whether it is PMAY, whether it is whatever, build. That's the it's a kind of a numbers game. So it is fine. Numbers. Yes, you need to build more because more stock. It is a supply demand thing. So more stock in the market, then prices are supposed to be stabilizing, but they are not in fact happening. So why is economics not working? That is because whether it is built or unbuilt, you still can't occupy it because there's no road, there's no water, there's no safety, there's no milk booth, there's no school for my child, there's no bus connectivity. So therefore, I want to postpone moving there. Even the tenant, I want to give it on rent, but nobody is willing to take it on rent. So there are serious issues. So it is not mere construction, but looking at housing as a complete ecosystem. Unless you give me all those other things along with the flat, I need a school nearby, I need a vegetable market nearby, I need a safe transportation. When I have all of that, then certainly this leveling of the market will happen. So we need to think beyond construction. I fully agree on that. Then there were some people who had mentioned here. I was looking at some of these questions about slums. I think there was some question, but yes, formal, legal, secure is not there for many. So therefore, the easiest option is getting into a slum, because again there are slumming happens through social networks. It doesn't happen through the internet. So therefore, you may do a lot of digital PMAY stuff, but then how actually the journey of a migrant starts from the village, and how he finds his way into the city, and how he gets a job, and how he gets a roof. That's a very interesting story, which perhaps the bureaucracy is unaware of, or chooses to ignore, whatever that be. So in that process, uh, perhaps these government programs fail. Last but not the least, I want to make one last point, that is on the rentals, is because despite all of the history of rental that we have, I was a member of the rental task force of the government of India, and I've been saying this again and again. How do I get my tenant out if I don't want him to continue? That still continues to be a big problem. There are many good tenants who will behave well, and they will walk out, but there are also very bad tenants who will not vacate and who will create problems. So getting your tenant vacated is a serious issue. So therefore today people would rather keep their apartments locked than giving them out on rent. So reform at a wide variety of levels is necessary. And let me tell you, this will not happen overnight. This is something that has to happen gradually. People have to be made more aware, and reform at multiple levels have to simultaneously happen, and all this will take time to sink in and to actually happen. So expecting miracles to happen overnight, that my government will do all of this in the next couple of years, is more of political rhetoric than anything else. So we need to give time for all these changes to happen. I'll stop here.
Well, thank you, Professor Rao. So yes, as it is very much evident from today's this entire discussion that, and I have just one specific, two specific like clarifications or questions. Like we know that the as far as the challenges of affordable the housing is concerned, the challenges of affordability and adequacy is there. But affordable housing in Indian cities is also faced with the third challenge of legitimacy. So any affordable housing stock, whether built new by the public or private actors or through say upgradation of the existing stock, they must consider how to secure what are often referred to as the property rights. But again, at the same time, there are divergent views on the importance of rights and right-based approaches to affordable housing. There are both supporters as well as a critique of these approaches. So what is your think on it? Like how to think of an appropriate regime of property right? Is it possible to think of certain criteria to design such kind of regimes? And if so, then what forms of rights or right-based approaches may be more or less relevant for affordable housing? And what should the right claims be addressed to, and who should they ask for? So this is one. Another thing is that this is related to the again this right-based question. Like we know that there is this scarcity of reasonably priced land in Indian cities, but I was just looking at some of the data on from the Indian cities, and it seems that in the urban India, almost 40% of the land where slums are located are actually owned by the urban local bodies, and also another 10% by some other public agencies, and about 3% by the railways. So it is fairly clear that leveraging publicly owned land, if we can do that appropriately, that could make significant gains in addressing this unmet need of affordable housing. So how can the public landowners be empowered or encouraged to allow for sort of in situ upgradation for settlements on their land? So so these are the two specific questions which if you want, you may share your thoughts on it. And before that, let me now request the director of IMPRI, Dr. Arjun Kumar.
Amir sir is also here.
Oh, Samir sir is here.
Yes, yes.
Okay, then now I request Dr. Samir Unhale. Mr. Samir Unhale sir, if you please share your comments on this.
So thank you very much, and sorry for the mix-up with the net and the instrument. It was very interesting and very actually enumerating learning experience of Dr. Rao and Professor Bhide on various aspects of housing. Considering from the perspective of a municipal body and its intersections with, say, housing, I can think of some 4 to 5 areas in which a municipal body and housing in the city can have some intersections. One would be, of course, as was mentioned earlier, the master plans. Second, as a planning authority. Secondly, of course, in the regulations, there are aspects of TDRs, the development rights here, more popular probably here in Maharashtra. Then we have zonings and FARs and FSI. Third, of course, is the property tax segment, in which the newer property are charged more heavily than the older properties, and that move of changing even the 15th Finance Commission is asking to move on the capital-based property taxation. So it has in a way implication onto the new housing stock that might come, and whether there could be in some cities, I believe an experiment was done of having an additional property tax for those flats which are vacant instead of giving them concessions to encourage better occupancy of housing. And third, of course, was the fourth element I can think of is of the implementation of the various housing missions that we have had earlier, or from earlier actually. In fact, 30 years now we are into the mission approach of giving into housing sector. And the fifth point I can think of is of what Professor Rao said was regarding the availability of the civic services to the various areas in which the housing and comes up, and it being one of the reasons why they are really remain sometimes vacant. Of course, housing needs to be a part of the right to life, dignified life. It will take time because the maturity and financial capability of any country and society has to emerge to that level to really come to that state. We do talk of SDGs now, SDG 13 SDG 20 by 2030. So SDG 11 is regarding housing of cities, first itself being that of housing, the 10 targets So regarding this intersection of city and housing, I think the instruments that the cities have to really influence the housing sector from the municipal perspective may not be very great, apart from making the building permissions under the ease of doing business. New, more importantly, having various new business models into the housing sector, I think is a need of the hour, because the old model of having a builder or give the government constructing a house, some people purchasing it and either purchasing it or living on rent, is what the four aspects that we are currently seeing now in India. But we need really to move ahead. I think what we did 20 or 30 years back may not give us the results that we expect in coming 1 or 2 decades. Third, I wanted to share was regarding the international perspective, really, that the global south had been deprived of its wealth for probably over 2 centuries. And therefore, the overall poverty that we see in these countries obviously reflects in that of urban poverty, and housing being the most important element or aspect of the urban poverty matrix. So when you talk of housing as a sector, the informal element in housing is of course very important. And I always have a doubt, a question actually, as to why legal housing is so costly. And in fact, it actually makes unaffordable. If you really look at the cost of a, say, the 400 square feet carpet or a 500 square feet decent 1 bedroom flat, it shouldn't really be more than 8 to 9 lakhs. The rest either is the land pricing or the other elements that creep up into the sector. So housing from affordability need not only be ownership, and new other models also will have to be developed. Probably the secret lies in coming up models solve the issues of housing shortages, rather than just as did the eminent panelists said, that thinking only from the supply side of the housing issues. Regarding informality, efforts being done even in India, I think very sure of the name, but I think Awas is one of the organization which is working on using the microfinancing methodologies to deal with the rent paying capacities of the urban poor. So overall, I feel that the housing sector is, of course, is extremely complex. We are essentially a territorial species, and whether legal right or no rights, the possession of land is extremely crucial for what we might choose to do. So it is going to be a very, this decade will be extremely important. We will have to be flexible and of course also innovative, and hopefully a lot of out of box thinkings would be required to tackle the housing problems vis-a-vis a city is concerned. But I do feel that the municipal leverages, so to say, on housing, apart from implementing schemes and DCRs, are a bit limited. That's the case in Maharashtra, where the planning authority is the municipal body. I'm aware of certain states in which the planning body is not the municipal body, and therefore it does creates another limitations on the municipal body on how it could influence the housing sector of their city. So these are the limited points, Soumyadipji, sir. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and apologies for the technical glitches.
No, thank you, Mr. Unhale. At least you could manage to offer some of the important practitioners' insight into this entire discussion. So now let me quickly move over to Dr. Arjun Kumar, who is the director of this IMPRI, to share your comments, please.
Yes, thank you, Samir sir, for finally bringing for so many. And this decade really is called the decade of action. So we see so much forward to this. Adding to today's deliberation, the topic housing and real estate, especially focusing on the pandemic, which Professor Rao has and all the panelists have covered so much. The one issue of congestion was really highlighted because of this specific pandemic. And even with that, since we are talking, so the issue of slum was getting a bit missed because we have been focused a lot on creating new stock, and redevelopment has been, despite we are having so many of ISR models, the private sector participation is not happening, and which is also, I would say, a salient feature. It is becoming of our urbanization by and large. Western and southern cities are doing very good in some of their model, but that is not very much happening. And I would also say that we are also not aspiring to become internationally competitive in that regard. So how do you see, sir, this issue going forward, and how do we also deal with our issue of slums? In the planning also, we saw that the number of households in slum, that data and others are also not updated with us. And there is also, when we are looking, because the housing market really went through a very speculative phase, which plateaued in the last few years. So because of that, and there are also concerns of the inflation in the raw materials by builder association or those who are also making their flats. So, how do we see to regulate this market, not to curb or have Inspector Raj, but to enable this to really become more enabling, as Akshay sir was also mentioning that. And we also got an opportunity before pandemic to make a draft rental housing policy for Delhi government. And I would say that all the knowledge idea we also have. Sensor has also given so many model. DSI, IDC have, I think, almost 50,000 flats ready and vacant because of application of things. So, sir, how do you see, sorry, some glitches. So how do you see that we had this aim of housing for all by 2020 in Rajiv Awas Yojana, in PMAY housing for all by 2022? So how do we see that for Atmanirbhar Bharat push or for the New India 2047, what new housing agenda in planning and implementation terms we should have now going forward, so that we have our urban sector also very dynamic, contributing, internationally competitive, vibrant, but I would also say sustainable and inclusive, which part has been highlighted. Professor Rao, your comments. Then we can go to each panelist for a way forward 1 minute round. Yes. Professor Rao, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I just heard the commissioner speaking. I think he has very nicely addressed the two issues which Dr. Samyadeep had wanted me to speak on. So I don't think I can add anything better because he has very nicely summarized the rights issue and the other issue that you were talking about. So actually, the situation as I see is a very complex situation, because India is a very large country. We live in several generations together at the same time, and we are a federation of several states, and you can't have one solution that fits all. Different states have very unique state legislation. So in this kind of a situation, diversity has to prevail. Diversity of ideas and thinking has to prevail, and there have to be local situations to suit local requirements. And then it is also important for us to realize that housing is not a fundamental right. Housing is a legal right as per the Constitution of India. There was an amendment that was made to the Constitution of India a long time back when this was done. But of course, that apart, the right to life and right to livelihood and other things are fundamental rights. So there is a peculiar position here, but how much you can demand and what you will actually get is less. I will only say that unless and until the governments, whether it is the local government, whether it is the state government, whether it is the central government, unless and until they take low-income housing, affordable housing, and slums very seriously, which I think they are not taking very seriously. So till such time, there will always be problems, and also this whole issue of trying to solve problems overnight, because the 75th year of Indian independence is knocking on the doorstep, and therefore we need to immediately set our house in order. So these kind of targets I do not subscribe to personally, because that's not the reason for us to wake up. We should have woken up a long time back. and then now 75 years is coming, so therefore now we need to quickly put it in order. You can't put these things quickly in order, because these are there are various kinds of regimes which have got very strongly entrenched. You may call it the land mafia, or you may call it whatever. So to break all of these and to reconnect them and reconfigure them and rejig them and put new regimes in place is a kind of a revolutionary process which will take its own time, and it will be different for Mumbai, it will be different for Delhi, it will be different for maybe Hyderabad or Kochi. Issues are very different there. So therefore one has to have tailor-made solutions, and one should not have these targets of 2022 and 75 years and all that kind of a thing. Of course, we often are told that, look, Singapore has solved its problems, Hong Kong has solved its housing problems, China has also solved many of its problems. So why are we not able to do it? So there are fundamental issues here, because we are a large democracy, and therefore for many things we have a very tolerant society. So you want to do a big project, we talked about redevelopment just now. So the moment the redevelopment everything was done, there is an NGO which stands up and says that you can't do this, you can't do that, you go to the court, and the whole process gets stalled for umpteen number of years, and ultimately after all this is done, then finally it is said that okay, now you can do it, and by the time the costs have gone 3 times. So this has been happening virtually in every project. Now you can't say that you have to have a dictatorial regime and not allow people to voice there. So people have a right to dissent in a large democracy, and people are dissenting. That means democracy is working. So we should be happy about that also. We've discussed many times in the past at various fora. I do recall the 4 task force reports that were prepared in the 70s. Then I recall the 13 reports that were prepared in 1988 in the National Commission of Urbanization, and subsequently at various other places as well. We need to change the way urban local bodies function. We need to have lesser number of, we keep talking about this multiple body, interdepartmental lack of coordination, etc., at the local level. So there are so many governance issues. There are governance issues. You have the technical people, you have the bureaucratic people, you have the politicians, and then you have some NGO activists, and then you have the media. So there are all these who play a very active role here. So finding a solution is, to my mind, a very difficult task. It's not nobody. I'm very sure that nobody has a magic wand who can take it out from the pocket and give you a solution. So one should not even keep thinking about that, because there's also a lot of money that has to go into all of this. So whether it is roads or whether it is water supply, whether it is garbage management, huge amounts of money are required for us to achieve certain levels. If we don't have that much amount of money, where do you raise that money from? How do you repay that money from? For instance, you want to do a sewer system. So somebody will give you a loan, but how do you repay that loan? Because who's going to pay for the sewer system? Because I want to travel on a road, I pay the toll tax, because otherwise you'll not allow me to use that service. So I'll quickly shell out whatever it is. I don't have the fast tag, you will ask me to pay the double. I will cough it up immediately because I have to go. But in the case of a sewer system, it is not like that. So whether it is there or it is not there, things will go on. So there are the very nature of private goods and the social goods and common pool goods, all these also will come into play. So I would see Indian civilization today as an evolving nature. Probably Western civilizations also went through this kind of a process, and this will take its own time. And the people who matter today, the very fact that a large number of platforms are actually conversing all these issues. This itself is a sign of maturity of our society and of this particular domain of knowledge. So I would just leave all of you with these comments of mine.
So okay, thank you, and also I'm saying some of the comments are there in the quick Q&A box, but most of them I think you have already addressed. So let me now just quickly go over to all our other panelists to have their comments, maybe for a minute or so. So now I request Professor Bhide to start with your comment, please.
So I think it has been a very interesting discussion.
Yes.
And given the complexity of housing issues, I think rightfully so, the entire discussion has touched everything from taxation to public policy to governance to developers and political economy and a rights-based perspective versus other alternate perspectives. So we have touched many topics. Okay? But I do think there are two imperatives that one needs to accept, at least in the interim. Okay? One, that only construction of houses is not going to solve our housing issues. And therefore, there has to be a healthy mix of, uh, I think, both regulation as well as pragmatic acceptance of certain solutions that people themselves have lived in and demonstrated. And the third thing then is of at least reducing the entire disparity in the housing market, where even leave alone economically weaker section, but today there are several sections of the working classes who also are compelled to stay in slums and informal settlements. I think that is the section that really one has to target through affordable construction. The second is, how do we create a ethos for a local need oriented housing supply? And I think that perhaps is something that requires putting together a lot of heads, will also require significant city autonomy. Because I think, as Professor Rao rightly said, issues of Mumbai are different from issues of Delhi, are different from issues of Hyderabad or Kolkata or Burdwan, and so on and so forth. So I think, how does one bring in some of these issues to the city levels to find and even define solutions? I also see that what is a slum in Mumbai is not the slum in Ranchi, and it is not the same slum in Ahmedabad. So there might be different kinds of acceptabilities as well. And I would feel then everything is not necessarily a problem. So we can reduce our problems by firstly really trying to understand what about that problem is a problem really. So yeah, I'll stop here.
Thank you, Professor Bhide. And just request Dr. Sen, if you please.
Thank you. It's been a very long and very nice discussion on all aspects. So in 1 minute, let me just kind of summarize 2-3 points. One is, I like the idea of additional property tax Samirji told about on vacant houses. So we always talk about vacant land tax, but I agree with Samir sir that we need to have additional property tax in order to encourage them not to keep it vacant, but maybe give it for on a rent. So that will also promote the rental housing. So talking of the rent, when Mr. Pavan Dixit said that this about the rental yield, it is a matter of concern that we have the lowest rental yield. But I think as part of the rental policy kind of discussions, we have already have some models where we need to have a little innovative financing models in order to make it a profitable venture. And we have shown, maybe Pavanji, we can have a separate one-to-one discussion how to make it profitable. For that, pricing is very important. Pricing of the housing, the property units. So when we have that rental pricing better, then we can definitely have better yields. And so for now it is okay. And the third point regarding we all discussed about the right to adequate housing. It is very important. While the right to housing is firmly entrenched in international human rights law, its translation into national legal systems is in a particular and a meaningful manner, which is fraught with significant obstructions, fears, need to be done at the earliest. And the challenges relating to that right to adequate housing, such as the poorly framed right, can restrict the meaning of a right to housing instead of empowering eviction relocations, then articulation of a right and functionalities of everyday life. All these challenges need to be addressed going forward in order to honor the commitments given by the nations, including India, in the new to the new urban agenda declaration of Habitat 3. So yeah, as I think Professor Rao said and others said also that right to housing is a part of our right to life under Article 21, which Supreme Court in various judgments have already done it, expressed it. So to translate into the actual practice is a little difficult, but it's not impossible. So I think going forward, the ministry will also come out with how to, so all the 7 aspects which constitute the right to right to housing need to be done suitably. So I think that's it from me.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sen. Now it's over to Mr. Monani for your comments in a minute or so.
Monani sir is not here. I'm trying to.
So it's now is Mr. Sumit Monani sir is with us. So if yes, please.
Thank you. Actually, this was a very, very interesting talk, Samadipji and Arjunji. It was really a delight to listen to Professor Rao and also Professor Bhide madam and everybody. It was really, the issue is so complex, I mean, you cannot have a typical Newtonian mechanics of, A causing to B. It's, multiple factors are interplay, the social aspects is there, the psychologically, emotional. So it's a intermix of so many intersecting currents that, to think of a chain of causality leading us to our desired goal or destination is going to be very difficult. But I think that we will have to be very, very innovative. We require lots and lots of out-of-box ideas, as was said by sir on the construction material, the speed of construction, the civic amenities that we give, the financing and budgeting that is required for these activities. What could be the support from maybe municipal bodies or the various big and richer probably development authorities? How could state government help? What could be the impact? And I think the issue of finance was raised, social impact bond. I mean, various other bond. The bond market we are told is of almost $220 trillion. And the access to the municipal bodies of the urban sector for that is not even minuscule. It's not even worth calling minuscule actually. So I think this decade will be a decade of innovation. This decade will be a decade of adventure and courage and determination by all aspects and all sectors and all stakeholders. And I'm sure that the way it was mentioned by sir also, that other countries have resolved their housing problems, and it was just not from the supply side. We, I think, should all work together for even taking India's housing issue to that level in which we have sufficient, adequate, and affordable housing by whichever spectrum of property rights that we can think of and security of tenure that we can think of by and reach our SDGs by in the next decade or so. So that's it, Samadipji. Arjunji, that's thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Unhale sir. And then just let me have a very quick thoughts of Mr. Dixit.
Yes, Pavan sir.
Is he with us?
Yes, please unmute. Pavan sir, please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Definitely a lot of great insights here. And one thought that I strongly agree with Professor Rao is to have the real estate more focused rather than developer focused, because there are a lot of consumers who are from different states where the RERA hasn't been so strong, and they're stuck with their investment even after like 7 or 8 years in certain states. So such people come back whenever I have conversations saying that RERA is doing good in certain places, those people still have a reservation in appreciating it. But it's as it is again a state subject. How things are taken at state level, those are definitely the thoughts that have to be discussed and implement. I mean, the implementation has to be still is a question at certain states. The other interesting aspect, what I see coming out of this discussion is Mr. Dr. Akshay is saying there are models, would like to connect with him and explore what are the models that he can enlighten. So would like to definitely connect with him. So there are a lot of things to take away. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to be part of this one.
So, well, thank you. And then let me move quickly to Professor Rao for your final thoughts on it.
Oh, well, I thought I had already given my final thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think this was a very thought-provoking discussion that IMPRI has put together, bringing in different people from different walks of life. Has enriched the entire discussion. Different points of view have been put on the table, and I think I thoroughly enjoyed this whole discussion. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So for spending your some time with us. So I'm also thankful to all the participants, all the panelists, all the for this particular special lecture. And we are actually having this city conversation series for the last 2 or 3 months. So we will continue to have this for the next few months, and we'll continue with this city conversation series. And we hope to receive your support and encouragement for making this really an insightful event, and maybe we will contribute to the existing urban scholarship of Indian cities. So thank you once again. And so now what to Arjun, if you want to say anything in last
I just really
okay.
Want to thank Professor Rao, Professor Bhide, Dr. Sen, Unhale sir, Monani sir, Pavan sir, and you also, Samyadeep sir, and all the IMPRI team. And I wish you all a very nice day. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ji. Have a nice weekend.